You're listening to Story Struck. I'm Rachel, an editor and writing coach.
And I'm Nino, a ghostwriter and book coach. Welcome to our curious community where we dive into everything books and writing.
Now, let's get into the episode.
Hello and welcome to the Story Struck podcast. Today we are joined by Esther Lemmens, who is the architect of the Anthology of Hope anthology, and that is coming out this spring. And so, Esther, welcome. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
the podcast. You want to give yourself have a little intro, tell the people who you are, what you do, about you?
Oh gosh. Well, I do lots of things. My background is in graphic design, and I met a person some years ago who's trans non-binary, and we had an idea like, what about? And when the book 50 Shades of Grey was all the rage, and we thought, oh, why not make a book with 50 stories of local gender diverse people? But that idea got shelved, and then it started popping into my head again, sort of end of 2018. And then I thought, yeah, let's do more with it. And it's very much this intuitive nudge, Yeah, so I thought, well, how do I even start this project? And what I got was, well, with one conversation. So I was like, okay. So I chatted to a friend. At that time, I knew lots of queer friends and trans friends and non-binary friends and all that stuff. And I just had to sit down with one of them around their kitchen table basically. And we just had a conversation, recorded it. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to transcribe it and then I'll make it into a book chapter. Bless me for thinking that, because I've since learned it's not how it works. But at the time, that was my idea. But after I did that, I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to have all these audios. So why don't I start a podcast with those? Because I wanted the book very much to be a local project, but I thought podcast can be anyone, anywhere. So then in 2020, I finally, after about 8 or 10 conversations I have recorded, I launched the podcast, 50 Shades of Gender. And then I think things have just been ticking along since then. So the anthology idea came out of that. But also, yeah, I have lots of interests, so I'm very all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I forgot to mention is you are the host of the 50 Shades of Gender podcast, which just had its 115th episode come out, as I was able to grace it for that particular episode.
Yeah, that was such a fun conversation. I loved it.
Yeah,
That is awesome. I am super intrigued so how you started your process with like the interview and you're like, I'm going to make that into a book chapter. Cause that's literally how I used to do ghostwriting books for clients is I would interview them and then turn their interview to a chapter. And you're right. Like it seems so like, oh, like this is so easy and just do that. And then you're like, oh, wait, but like, I need to like then make that into like a whole like journey, like an arc and like a thing. And it's just, there's so many moving pieces to that. And especially you're telling their story, right? And so you're doing the writing. And so it's like, all right, am I writing in my voice? Am I writing in their voice? Like, how am I going to capture this? How am I going to put this together? So I love to hear like kind of how that process came together for you and how you ultimately decided to do the different chapters within the Anthology of Hope.
I mean, the only thing I'm doing for the anthology myself is, well, not the only thing. I mean, I'm project managing it essentially. And also all I have to write, I guess, is the intro, the introduction. But the rest is, other people's stories, voices. And it has definitely had its own journey of evolving. And in a way, initially I got this idea popped into my head years ago. It was similar to the podcast, like just popping ideas. And then sometimes something just kind of grabs hold of you and pulls you forward a little bit, I'm sure you all know what I mean. So, so I got a few stories sent to me when I put the word out initially, again, from friends. It was kind of like the podcast. I started with just a handful of friends and then the word spread, So they sent me some things and then someone sent me a poem and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, poetry is included. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And then I had a sense of like maybe some art. Someone sent me some art and then I was like, okay, great. Yeah. Art. Yeah. That would work. That would work. That is also included. And initially I was thinking I wanted to be like just a straightforward kind of, paperback reading book. So I asked the person, can you make it black and white? So that's great. So then it can just be included in the book and I don't have to do anything in particular with it. And as time went on, all of a sudden I got this nudge to say, hang on a minute, this book wants to be in color, big, bold colors. And I thought, well, it makes total sense really, doesn't it? Because of the nature of it. I thought, oh, great. Okay. And then the size as well. It kind of wanted to be a bit bigger. So I looked at one of the many queer books that I've got, and I was like, yeah, this one, yeah, that looks about right. And then I knew that the process, like, okay, I'm going to collect these stories, get them edited, all the things, all the steps, like this is the order in which you do things. And I got to a place where I was like, no, I need to design it. I need to see it. So I just grabbed a couple of the stories that hadn't even been edited yet. And I thought, I just need to do something visual, because that then also kind of gives you more momentum and it pulls you forward in ways, even though it's not quite by the book, if you will. So yeah, that's kind of how I've been going. But also then you get stories and you're like, how would this fit? Does this fit? Is this right? Is this the vibe that I'm looking at? And then you have to really start thinking. There's always unexpected stuff, right? Because you can't plan for everything, although I try, but you just can't. So yeah, so I've been thinking about, oh, would this work? Would this need, like, is this hopeful? Yeah, it's hopeful, but it's also like full of grit and defiance and also joy and all that stuff. So how does that fit? Maybe I need to put a little content warning in front of some of the stories. Yeah, just stuff unfolding and just keep on responding to the next thing and the next thing. But it's very much a collection of different people's stories, and even the whole, American spelling versus English spelling. I was like, what do I do with that? Do I make it consistent? Do I just leave it as it is? So thankfully I have a friend helping me with the editing. So she's been she's been great. She's been editing and giving me some feedback and advice and stuff like that. And she's going to help me order the stories as well once they're all there. So yeah, that was the long answer to the question.
No, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, the whole process of making a book is a long process, right?
Indeed.
I think
Yeah.
that's so neat how you were talking about like trying to find that narrative flow to go through it. Especially with like this combination of content, right? So is maybe the poem or the art like a palate cleanser after a heavier story? Kind of things like that of like how we're going to move the different bits and bobs about. I think that's a really fun part about an anthology or like we had someone on who was doing a memoir and it was a collection of stories. And he's like, that was the hard part of seeing how do I do these individual collections of stories? Because I may be putting them out of chronological order, but it made more sense to have them grouped in a certain way versus another way. And so I think the way you were laying it out of like, I need to physically see this out is so powerful. Like I have that, like with some of my editing clients, like Nino, she was like, I'm not sure, like if this is the way I want it. I was like, put it all on index cards, like color them, and then physically lay it out on the floor in front of you. And so I think that's really cool to
Love it.
get yourself out because that's something that's really helpful in the editing stage because you're so used to seeing it that one way that your mind is filling in the gaps already. So
Mhm.
changing how you're looking at it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that with the index cards. And for me,
Oh
because
my
I'm such a
God.
visual
It's
person.
like, oh my gosh, it was so helpful, right? Because when you're a visual person, like you literally can see your book there on the floor that way, you know?
Amazing. I need to do that as well. I did start with a few bits of paper and stuff. I'm like, I'm not nowhere near the stage of organizing this. But yeah, so that's one way of the visual aspect of it. And for me, it's also like layout and design,
Yeah.
that's my thing. And then seeing it really just
Mm.
it helped. It really helped because it's been such a balance for me about like what am I focusing on right now? And what is my vision for the future? And it's like I feel like it's this infinity symbol, like this fluid like process of like need to focus on here, but also keep my eye on the big vision and then come back to here and like that. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I
I
love
think
the use of the infinity symbol there.
yeah. And I would say my tip for you being visual with graphic design, like this just popped in my head for you, is for your collection of the stories, the different things that are in there, to actually just make like a little visual for each chapter, each story in there. Of whatever it goes to you. So, like, if one thing's like super hopeful, like maybe that's the rainbow. Something that's like a little deeper, maybe that is like a storm or a torrent. And then kind of just looking at those visuals laid out for yourself of how do these visuals go together and kind of visually seeing it in a graphic versus like having just the words on the page, which hits your brain a little bit differently.
Mm,
Yeah, Rachel just
yeah.
lending her Virgo energy out to us. Like,
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
that's
That's
awesome.
brilliant. Yeah.
I really like how you're taking a very artistic
Mhm.
approach to this anthology because as I think I've talked about on the podcast before, art is the start of change. It's
Mm.
like And so like if you actually look at social change, it typically starts in an artistic space first and then weaves its way through our social consciousness and eventually landing in our political consciousness where it actually creates systemic change. And so coming from it as a queer artist myself, I think having that variety of art, the variety of ways in which we can express how we're experiencing life, how we are planting seeds of hope and seeds of change in the world, and through different mediums, like having an or a poem or a painting all in this anthology, I think is just such a like an intentional, artistic, also very queer way of doing things.
Amazing. I love that. Loved how you framed that. And it made me think of what I've heard people say, and I think I've heard you say it on your podcast too, how books are not like you don't sit down and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna make this story up. I'm gonna it comes from my brain. It's more like you get in the zone and you open yourself up and then it flows through you. So it kind of comes from like your brain is the translator, not the creator in a way. It's co-creative, on so many levels. So I found that to be very much the case with this anthology. I had my vision for it, my ideas, that were sparks. And then as I took another step, it was almost like it pulled me forward in the direction that it wanted to go and be created. So I love that co-creative nature of it in a way.
And that's how actually the poem that I wrote that you're putting in the anthology,
Yeah.
that's what happened there. I just like heard something on a podcast. I was sitting outside journaling. I was listening to a podcast and one person said, "Hope is a rebellion" on the podcast. And I stopped. I'm like, oh, this is a poem. I wrote it in 10 minutes tops. And within 2 weeks, I had somebody I like recorded it and I posted it on social media. And I had somebody reach out and say, I want to turn this into a song. And
Wow.
I'm like, is this some sort of scam? I'm like, how could someone scam me with this? Because like, this is just like, doesn't make sense. Right. I don't have a huge following. Like, you know, not a ton of people saw it or whatever. And no, this was a choir director. And he's like, nope, I want to turn this into a song. We're gonna perform it at this thing. Like, are you okay with it? And he's crafted it and turned it into a choir song. He's gonna be submitting it to the National Justice Song Choir. I'm saying this wrong. Choir book or whatever. And then right after he had reached out to me and like you were talking to me about this anthology and I suggested to you like this poem is now in your anthology and stuff. And I think that that's like a great example of like whenever we are open, we have like the intention and we have the open channels to the creative process, we can funnel these things in that can create huge change. Lady Gaga talks about Born This Way happening the exact same way, where she just like wrote it all down, wrote the song out in like 10 minutes or something like that. And it created this massive movement. She then created the Born This Way Foundation after that. It was this massive thing. And it was like at that instant of that download. And so I know we are all very spiritual people here. And so those things, they're almost like creative divine intervention because like I said, it's the start of change. And so anytime we can put our creative power into something with the intention of creating positive change in the world, like the better. Like, this is how we should create, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, into a song. That's amazing. How cool is that?
It's so freaking
It's
cool.
awesome. I know when you read the poem to me, I
Oh,
was like, oh, and then you told me that, I'm like, oh, I'm not surprised. Like, I love it because I get like first like dibs, I guess, on hearing the things. And so I was like so excited. I cannot wait to hear it performed. And to see it in print. It's just absolutely beautiful.
I just
So
did the sheet music for it, and it's so freaking cool. It's like so surreal.
I know, and you're a musician too, a singer, so, like, when you see that, like, I can just imagine you can picture in your head with the notes, like, how it's going to
Mhm.
sound.
It's
Yeah,
gonna be so cool. It was so cool seeing my name on it because he wrote Nino and not Lauren, because Nino's my preferred name, and I'm just like, "Yes, this feels right. This is my artistic name, like, this feels right."
amazing. I love that.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I can't wait to have your anthology on my shelf to be like, and there's this.
Yay.
It
That's
is
such a
out
thing, isn't
there.
it? It's like I remember you talked about the Claires in one of the episodes that I listened to as
Mhm.
well, or that came up. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's just about translating vibration into different senses in a way, isn't it? Like, because the poetry and the words, and then came the song, and then there's like the visual. Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's that
I
real
think
creative flow, isn't it?
have you heard of The Shape of Water? I think that's the name of the book or
I've
something.
heard
Like,
of
I
it.
can't
Yeah.
remember if that's the exact name, but this like scientists, like big heavy into science, like actually looked at like water molecules and would expose it to different vibrations. So like some like very like heavy like punk rock versus classical music, and he would look at like the particles of the water, like ice particles, and you could actually see how the vibrations impacted the molecular structure of things. So
Amazing.
I
That's
just always
Masaru
find neat,
Emoto?
right?
Is it
Yes,
Masaru
that
Emoto?
is that it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And now Veda Austin is taking that work forward
Hmm.
in her own way. And she's just written a book or released a book. And there is a system that she does the freezing of the water, exposing the water, and then freezing it, and then taking a picture with your phone. You can do it yourself at home. And she's got that included in her
Mm.
books.
So
I'm dying to
I
try
was
it out.
right this whole time.
And then, like for me too, like if like folks like have a hard time maybe connecting to like the clairs or like kind of that more spiritual side, like from the psychological side, I think of the flow state as when we are tapping into that. And I feel like that is helping us to get out of kind of the conscious mind and getting into the unconscious and subconscious. And once we're able to hit that disconnected state, that's where we're more open to things, whether you want to view it as coming from yourself or outside of yourself. That's where we then have those just magical moments where stuff just goes and it just feels good. You get lost in the space, lost in the time. And I think it's just so amazing to be able to get into that flow state. And so I encourage people to try different ways to see what works for you. We're always talking about writing rituals here and getting into that zone. And I think that goes right with that vibrational stuff. So maybe you're someone who needs to be really amped up and you need to have like that hardcore music or a soundtrack to go behind you with it. Where me, if I have any vocals in the thing, my brain can't disconnect. It's like stuck on the vocals and I can't use that to be creative. But other people feed off of that energy. And that's why they like to work in a coffee shop or something like that.
I love that. Like when I'm trying to do something or write, I can't, like you, I can't have vocals in the sound, but like the bustling noise of like a coffee shop can be just right. It's distant enough, isn't it? There's so many
Mhm.
different layers of sound, aren't there? And for some things, I feel like I just need to sit quietly in my own space and just sort of tune in and really let that wash over me. So there's different time and space for different things and different approaches. Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of different approaches, so you have written other books as well. And I'm wondering kind of how this process of the anthology compared to the books that you were writing that was your writing versus kind
Mm.
of being this orchestrator of this amazing collection of an anthology.
Yeah, wow. So the books I've written, they were actually collaborative books that I
Okay.
contributed a chapter to. So there's three of them now. And yeah, so the first one was I don't know, very kind of different subjects, if you will. So the first one was called Sacred Redesign. That I wrote about an interaction I had where I met a person locally who was then a guest on my podcast, and that was just felt really yeah, it felt really like a magical unfolding of circumstances. And then the second one was kind of like a fun project. It's called Do More Stupid Things. I think that had a similar vibe. The third one is called Sex Meets Life. So that was very much personal, very open, quite vulnerable. And that was an amazing book collection done by a friend of mine who's actually editing my Hope anthology stories. And so the first thing I actually used ChatGPT for was to compare my first chapter that I wrote and the second ones. I fed them. This was like a prompt from someone because I was just not interested in using AI for anything really. But they said feed them like the first chapter and then feed them the second one, and then ask ChatGPT to tell you how they compare, how your writing style has evolved. And I did, and it just blew my mind. I was like, what? This is amazing. So yeah, since then I have used it, but like I say, mostly for like just research and summarizing stuff that I'm too lazy to find out for myself, basically. But yeah, Yeah, I think I've gone off on a tangent, which is quite normal. Did I answer it?
It's
And
all
what was the question?
good. No, I think that was great. We were kind of talking about the difference between doing the actual writing yourself versus you were
Mhm.
kind of, collecting this and using that artistic background to bring this together into a beautiful
Mhm.
project. So in the States, it kind of makes me think of what we would call a coffee table book, which is like this beautiful book that you would always want to have out on display on your coffee table. So whenever people would come to visit, they would be like, ooh, and they'd want to open it, flip through, and be able to just read like one thing in there and be able to take something away from it. So that's how I
Nice.
envision this. Like this would live on my coffee table, and any
Yeah.
guest would be able to come and just have an incredible experience from just reading, just one page or one story in there. And then they would obviously want to get it for themselves.
That's right. Oh, I love that idea. 'Cause I was thinking of at some point doing like a special edition, perhaps a hardback, because coffee
Yeah.
table books are often like hardbacks, aren't they?
Yeah.
So I have plans for paperback, but yeah, that would be a really fab idea. I like that. I love
Yeah,
the
that's what
idea
it
of
makes me
playing with,
think of.
yeah, like, foil blocked cover and, all that stuff, all the fancy print finishes. I'm like, yeah,
Special limited edition.
yeah,
take it.
exactly. Yeah.
I'll take it. I love a good pretty book.
Yeah, me too. Like sprayed edges and stuff like that. It's like, oh God, this is amazing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here because my internet is just getting worse as it goes along. And
no.
we'll find out how this episode gets put together, and hopefully it looks pretty. And me saying this right now is just tells the listener just like, oh, I guess they were having problems and it's not such a big deal. So hopefully the listening experience has been great. That's my intention. We're going to have to figure something out for our next podcast recordings and stuff because this is ridiculous.
Yeah. If you have any
Thank you
issues or
so
anything,
much
and if
for
you
coming
if you
on.
need to do it again, then that's
Yeah.
let me know. It's all right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we'll see.
Esther,
We'll
will
see
you-
how the magic puts it together.
Would you like to share, Esther, where people can find your works and information about the upcoming Anthology of Hope?
Yes, I'd love that. So the podcast website is 50shadesofgender.com, as in FIFTY, /hope is where the details have been living and where the call out has been living. But I set up a new company to kind of oversee and run the project for various reasons. And that is called the Rewrite Initiative. So I've got rewriteinitiative.com, and that will live on /hope. So now I've committed and I better create it before this episode comes out. Yes.
Beautiful. We will have all of those linked below. We'll hold you
Thank
accountable
you.
to manifest that into reality. And do you use social media at all, or do you prefer people to contact you via email?
Social media works. Yeah, I've got Facebook. I'm on the most. Instagram a little bit. Besides that, I'm not really on X, to be honest. Blue Sky, that's a thing. Anyway, yeah. So mostly Facebook, bit of Instagram. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Check out the show notes for details and links from the episode. And don't forget to subscribe and follow for more. Special thanks to our composer, Micah Silverstein. Enjoy the rest of the music.